Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Women of Ancient History, a series on my channel where I create short historical profiles summarising the lives of women who live within ancient history who I believe deserve to be remembered more than they are. Last episode was all about Olympias, the mother of Alexander the Great, and the lengths she went to ensure her son's rise to power. Today we're discussing another very powerful woman, one who has been interpreted in various ways throughout history. She was the ruler of the Palmyrene Empire, an empire that only lasted 3 years and yet opposed Rome. Today we are talking about Zenobia. Septimia Zenobia was born in Palmyra, a city which is now modern-day Syria. There's a lot of speculation about her ancestry, but due to her marriage to the ruler of the city, Odenathus, we know she certainly wasn't a commoner. Primary historian Al-Tabari describes her stamina and endurance, especially while riding horses. She would also march with her troops on foot long distances. She could also hunt equally to man and could outdrink anyone. So she was pretty cool. Palmyra was under Roman rule. It was a part of the Roman Empire. This was a very prosperous region as it was an important trade center on the Silk Road. Merchants traveling to Rome or from Rome traveling by this road delivering silk had to pay tax to even stop and rest in the city. A group of Sassanid Persians began to block the Silk Road, blocking this trade route to Rome, which Rome was very obviously not happy about. A Roman army was sent to drive them out, but failed. So Odenathus gave it a try and succeeded. Rome just assumed he was acting in favor of Rome. But Odenathus actually tried to make a deal with these Persians. He only ended up driving them out because the deal didn't go through. He was acting in his own interests, which just happened to align with Rome's interests as well. In return for his favour to Rome, Odenathus was made governor of all of the eastern part of the Roman Empire. That's a lot of power. And for a man with such power, you'd think he'd have a very tragic and noble death, but no, he was assassinated by his nephew because of a hunting dispute. There used to be some speculation that Zenobia had him assassinated, but pretty much every late writer and historian agrees that that's not true. Zenobia's son is only 10 years old, too young to rule. So technically, he is the ruler, but the one making the decisions and really leading the charge is Zenobia. Zenobia becomes regent of a large part of the Roman Empire. She surrounds herself with a court of philosophers and intellectuals and upholds her late husband's policies. At this point, Rome and Palmyra still had a pretty strong relationship since all of Odenathus' actions aligned with Rome's interests. During Zenobia's rise to rule, Rome was in the middle of what is called the crisis of the 3rd century. This was a time where Rome went through 26 emperors. Who was in power was constantly changing and it was just causing chaos. Zenobia starts to make changes to the region. Rome is way too distracted with all its other internal problems to start looking at Palmyra and Zenobia and what she's doing. Zenobia is aware of this and is willing to take advantage of it. So what does she do in this time? She invades Egypt. She sends an army into Roman Egypt and claims it as her own. However, she doesn't do so recklessly. At this time, the Roman governor of Egypt was away on campaign, and the guy who was the stand-in was beginning to start a revolt against Rome. So from Rome's perspective, Zenobia marching in and invading Egypt, taking it over, claiming it as her own, would have been seen as securing it for the Roman Empire and defeating the instigator of this revolt. It creates a pretty solid excuse for her invasion, and it was very successful at first, until Zenobia and the Syrians were driven out by returning Roman forces. These Romans attempted to drive them back all the way to Syria, but this is where the Syrians performed a counterattack and decimated the Roman army. Zenobia has now secured Egypt, and so she continues to expand. She enters diplomatic negotiations with the regions in Levant and Asia Minor, adding them to her now growing empire. The wealthy, attractive Palmyrene Empire begins to grow. Rome is still caught up in its own internal problems to really pay attention to what's happening. And so far, Zenobia hasn't done anything that goes against Rome. Zenobia is smart about this. She amasses power in a way that isn't going to aggravate and draw conflict from the Roman Empire. This is the point where things start to change. She creates trade agreements, she makes negotiations with the Sassanid Persians, and adds regions to her empire without consulting Rome and ones that don't act within Rome's interests. This is no longer a Roman playing to Rome's needs. This is an empire becoming independent of Rome. In 271 CE, her empire stretched through modern-day Iraq, through Turkey, and across Egypt. Then the Emperor Aurelian comes into power. He was a soldier first and a politician second. While previous emperors just turned a blind eye to the Palmyrene Empire or didn't have the resources to do anything about it, Aurelian saw it. After doing a bit of cleaning up by defeating the Goths, the Alemanni, and the Vandals, he decides it's time to take back the eastern part of the Roman Empire. His initial approach to this was to destroy every town and city loyal to Zenobia. However, when he reached the town of Tyana, the home to his favourite philosopher, said philosopher came to him in a dream and said that mercy was to be the way to victory. And so he spared Tyana. Mercy turned out to be a sound strategy. The towns became more willing to surrender to a merciful emperor, and so he reached Syria easily. While Aurelian marched through her city, Zenobia was rallying her troops. The Battle of Imme broke out between the two armies, and Aurelian won. The Palmyreans were slaughtered, but Zenobia herself fled to the city of Emesa. She had more men there, and this was also where her treasury was stored. Wherever Zenobia fled, Aurelian pursued. The two armies met again outside the city of Emesa, where Aurelian once again won. Her forces were destroyed and Aurelian destroyed the city, presumably taking her treasury as well. Zenobia once again managed to escape. She went to Palmyra, the heart of it all, and prepared her city for defense. Aurelian wasn't far behind and began to besiege the city. Historian Edward Gibbons depicts what Zenobia may have been feeling at this moment. She retired within the walls of her capital, made every preparation for a vigorous resistance, and declared, with the intrepidity of a heroine, that the last moment of her reign and of her life should be the same. How many ancient women do you actually hear from an ancient historian being described as a heroine? Zenobia hoped for reinforcements from the Persians, but it never arrived. She fled with her son and tried to reach safety in Persia. When Aurelian found her gone, he sent his cavalry to apprehend her. She was taken prisoner while trying to cross the Euphrates River and taken to Aurelian in chains. She protested innocence, trying to blame her actions on the advice of her advisors. Unfortunately, this is where things get a little bit complicated, since we're told about 5 or 6 variations of the end of her life by historians, though some are a whole lot more likely than others. For example, we know that she definitely was brought back to Rome. Pretty much all the variations of this state that she was brought back to Rome, so we can take that as a fact. Except for one source which claims her and her son drowned in a river trying to escape. But then that same historian also claims she was put on trial in Rome and then went to live in a Roman villa. Another claims she was paraded through the streets of Rome in a triumph parade. She was given a palace near Rome to spend her final days. Another is a very complicated story of Zenobia assassinating a tribal chief on their wedding night, escaping through a tunnel under a river and then committing suicide after being caught. Zenoris's claim is the most reasonable. She was taken back to Rome, likely had a private trial that wasn't very public, and then went on to marry another Roman, and Aurelian married one of her daughters. Zenobia being paraded through the streets in chains is actually the least likely of all these to happen. Aurelian wouldn't want to boast of defeating a woman. People would probably laugh if Aurelian was like, hey, here's this woman I fought really hard to beat and tried to take all the eastern part of our empire. From the Romans' perspective, that would make him look bad. He'd look weak doing that. Zenobia likely just lived a less lavish but still comfortable life in Rome. And that is probably the life of Zenobia. Though historians have embellished her story with a lot of lavish details, being paraded through the streets, Zenobia is actually treated with a lot of respect by historians. These were the Eastern historians writing this. This wasn't Tacitus or Suetonius, who thought all women had a lower place. Zenobia was actually allowed to rule. Had this taken place in the heart of Rome, in Rome itself, none of this would have been allowed to happen. It gives us a really cool opportunity to study a woman who wasn't ridiculed in her time. Instead, she was admired and respected for what she was. A smart, tactful politician and ruler who built an empire big enough to rival Rome. And that's worth remembering. So thank you so much for watching. I really do hope that you did enjoy and you got to learn something. If you did enjoy the video, please give it a like. It really helps out support the channel, and I know that this is the type of content people want to see. And if you want to see more episodes of this series or other history videos on my channel, subscribe so that you get to see them. I'm also currently making a series all about the history of asexuality. And that's all from me. Thank you once again for watching. Bye!